Hi, I'm Jackie, and I'm here to bring you Beyond the Pattern, where today we'll take a look at what stay stitching means. The point of stay stitching is to prevent the fabric from stretching before you assemble whatever garment you're making. You usually do this at a neck edge. You will do it on a princess seam, any place where you're going to be joining something which you will be clipping later and which has a curve to it. Even a very mild curve like a boat neck top. Today I've mocked up a neck edge, like a front neck edge, and we're going to stay stitch that. And all that means is that you're going to sew within the 5/8 inch seam allowance, or whatever seam allowance your pattern calls for. You'll be sewing in that allowance just to the inside of that, and you're going to pay attention to directional sewing. And by that I mean, when you stay stitch something, your pattern may just say to stay stitch, and I'll show you the stitching being done before you assemble the garment. But what it really means is that you are going to be very observant of directional sewing. You wouldn't take a curved piece like this for a neck edge and sew from one shoulder seam to the other. What we're going to do is we're going to sew from a shoulder seam to the center front, and then flip it over and sew from the other shoulder seam to the center front. Otherwise, this may stretch. And again, you're trying to keep the fabric from stretching before you ever attach the rest to it, the facing or the lining or whatever you're going to use. So let me show you. Before we begin, let me tell you that we're going to use the floral fabric as the outer fabric. We're going to pretend that this is the fashion fabric for the garment, and then the solid color that I'm going to show you later on would be a lining. So to do the stay stitching, you're going to stitch within the seam allowance of the garment that you're sewing, or the item that you're sewing. I'm just going to use 5/8 of an inch because that's pretty standard, but it could be 1/4 of an inch, it could be 3/8 of an inch, whatever. But you sew right on the, or right inside the seam allowance. And the purpose of this is simply to prevent the fashion fabric from stretching before you construct the garment. And you start with directional sewing, meaning that you're going to sew from, in this case, this is a mock-up of a neckline. You're going to sew from the shoulder seam to the center front, then you're going to flip it over and sew from the other shoulder seam to the center front. And I'll show you how right now. And you don't need to backstitch at either point. Okay, so now I flip the fabric over. I'm going to put it in place. I'm going to start at the other shoulder seam. And I have to be careful that as I'm sewing, I'm not putting tension on the fabric because I don't want to stretch the fabric. Remember, we're trying to prevent any stretching whatsoever. Otherwise, the neckline might not lie flat if you have stretching. And you might have noticed that I let the stitches overlap just a little bit in the center. Now, even though you have stay stitching in here, it does not give you free will to go ahead and manipulate this a lot or hang it or put weight on it, because it can still stretch a little bit. But our stay stitching is now in place, and we're ready to construct whatever we're making.